Hi there, I'm John and welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, welcome. I'm John from Nigeria, and on this channel I talk about books. I do the occasional book tags, book hauls, singular book reviews, and if you like essay length written reviews, I write for a Substack. I'll put the link below. It's called A Couple of Dorks, so please check out if you love essay full length written reviews. Today's video is going to be a review of a classic novel, and it's of the classic Passing by Nella Larsen. I mentioned this a bit in my wrap-up video, which is the video before this one, but yes, I finished this last month. Took me a while, but nevertheless got to the end. It's a really short book, by the way, and I would say one of the most important things that makes this book as great as it is, or why it's so brilliant, why I think it's so brilliant, is how Larsen achieves what she achieves in terms of like storytelling and the novel, and how I feel a lot of it is not like the writer who is just like free-flowing, freestyling, hoping to happen on a brilliant story, or they have the idea of the story and hoping it takes them where they are going and it will get them something that will be very valuable to the reader. I think why this is brilliant is because a lot of it is it's like intentional storytelling devices used. Like, I don't know if you're a writer, you might be able to tell, but so much of it has this rigidity that I'll come to in the video, but not rigidity per se, but there's a lot of it that feels very structured, and I believe that it's only because of that structure that this book is as brilliant as it is. But yeah, let's get into like the full thoughts and feelings on the book. Passing by Nella Larsen is set in 1920s Harlem, that's New York. At the beginning, we have a woman, Irene Redfield. She receives this note from a strange person, and it turns out that this strange person, she knows who exactly sent her the note, although the note is unaddressed. And at the beginning, we just get inklings of this encounter Irene has with a woman, Claire Kendry, who she discloses a bit of to us at the beginning of the novel. She tells us a bit of how they used to know each other years ago, before Claire Kendry got away from the town they grew up in. And in this letter, Claire Kendry expresses to Irene that she desires to see her again, because this brief encounter they had after so many years not seeing each other, and they had this small encounter in Chicago like 2 years ago, it sparked some things in her. And I think it's the first instance of one of Larsen's favorite writing technique we see in this novel, which is the use of partial disclosure. It's how she gave us this inkling of something that is going to happen or that has happened, and the characters are aware of it, but then we, the reader, we are not aware of it. She is aware of it, but then she partially discloses it to us in order to make us desire to know what it is. And I would say it mostly worked every time she did it in this novel, which brings us into the main story, where Irene reveals to us things from her life and reveals to us like a bit of things from Claire Kendry's life, setting her character for us and giving us this insight into her as a person. We get the encounter 2 years ago where Irene is sitting at this hotel restaurant type deal, and this woman who she cannot recognize comes up to her at that place, and for a bit she's like very frightened, because we learn that she is passing. She's black, but no one can tell, no, at least no one at the hotel can tell she's black. So she sits there and it's comfortable for her because she's able to pass. And this woman comes up to her and she fears that, oh, this woman might recognize that she's passing, or she wonders if the woman recognizes she's passing, because the woman keeps staring at her, when eventually she learns that it's Claire, her friend from long ago. And they strike up this conversation, and we get a sense of who Claire is in the conversation that they have, and how it's just kind of like meeting your long lost friend and re-encountering each other and just trying to catch up. And Claire fills Irene in on what her life has been like. Irene is now married to Brian, a man called Brian, and Claire is now married to a white man called John Bellew. And it's at that conversation, at that like first encounter, which is the encounter from 2 years ago, that we are confronted with like one of the major like themes of the novel, or which I'll say is the central theme of the novel. In that scene, Irene is actually passing, but it's not like the kind of grave passing where she's passing amongst a group of people. She states that she only does it to have access to some of these things, like these white hotels that she would not normally have access to. But then she learns about Claire's situation. Claire, who, yes, she heard rumors when she was growing up, but Claire confirms these rumors that, oh yes, she did fall into it with this white man, and now she's married to this white man, and she has a white child, a child who she's black, but she can pass for white, but then the child is mostly very white. Another scene where we see Irene passing for one thing, but Claire, who is coming to meet her, who is entirely passing as a white woman, there's now the conversation of passing for access, which we see with Irene. That's what she's doing, right? And we see Claire, who I think the examination with her is the idea of passing as a form of rejection, which I think are the two major things Larsen tries to look at with this book: the act of passing for access or passing for rejection, and like where is the line between these two things, right? What we get with Claire's character is this sense of like the denial of the black identity, because yes, although she can pass as white, she is inherently black, very black to the core. And it's like the reason she chooses to forgo this identity. And as we go into the book more and more, we see it's in the rhetoric she uses to describe herself, describe the people who she now associates with, but also the people who she used to know, which are the black people from her life. It is baffling to Irene seeing why she would do this, but also even at the scene, at that table scene, Irene wonders to herself how she was able to pull it off, how she was able to do it. On page 25 here, where Claire asks Irene, and she says, you know, Irene, I've often wondered why more colored girls like you and Margaret Hammer and Esther Dawson, lots of others, never passed over. It's such a frightfully easy thing to do if one's the type. All that's needed is a little nerve. And Irene is wondering to herself and wondering to Claire too, but what about like your background, where you're from? How do you explain it to these people? And Claire asserted that you'll be surprised in how much easier that is with white people than with us. Maybe because there are so many more of them, or maybe because they are quite secure and so don't have to bother. Never quite decided. And that really struck me, the idea of like the white man's security, which Claire is stating here, because it's actually the fact, kind of, because in this time, like, it's the way, it's not just the idea of them being outnumbered, right, but it's like who holds like power, the majority who holds power. And like I said, this is the 1920s Harlem, so we know that like things are still really, really bad, especially for black people at this time. And it's the idea that she looks white, right? And so the white man would not really know, and they would not really need to question this thing, because it does not really matter, as opposed to if it were black people, which I can say, being a black person, even though I'm not black American, like, we are very inquisitive people about like things like this. And so it kind of makes sense when she makes that statement, right? And then post that scene, Irene and Claire conclude to meet each other for tea, and Irene is distorted because she is uncertain about her relationship with Claire Kendry. They eventually get to meet, and we have one of the most like significant scenes in the novel, one of the scenes that really struck me because of the conversation had there. And it's a thing that Larsen does with it, the way time passes in this book. It's not a book where like there are so many days, there's a span of time, right, captured in the book. But then what Larsen uses a lot of the time is these long drawn out scenes where so much conversation is had in these scenes, and like, so there's so much that is fleshed out, and so we do not need like so many days passing. And I was really fascinated by that choice, and I think it's one of the reasons why the book feels whole even for such a small book. These scenes just have so much meat in them, and like no scene is wasted. And in this scene we have Irene, we have Claire, and Claire also has a guest who used to be one of those girls who could pass, who we also learn he's now passing, and it's Gertrude. And what is peculiar about Gertrude and Claire's passing is that yes, Claire is married to a white man and Gertrude is married to a white man, but Claire's husband does not know she's passing. His family do not know that she's passing. But it seems we learned that Gertrude, on the other hand, she marries into the kind of white family who we are told they do not even care that she's black. They know that she has like Negro blood. And it's in this scene that Larsen really hammers on the idea of the black person who might want to deny their identity for one reason or another, because there's the looming thought in Irene's mind of why these two women are doing this and like how safe it is. There's the constant thought of the safety, especially because you could be found out at any point, like someone from your past could come up, but Gertrude will know she's safe, right? But then with Irene, who is closer to Claire and who I think it seems they have more of a rapport, it's that thing of like Irene wondering how safe, like how tight safe it is. And we see in that conversation that Gertrude, Irene and Claire, they are talking about how they now have children, and I get hit by a ton of bricks in one of the conversations they have, which is about the children, where Claire reveals that she desires not to have any more children because the carrying of that first child, the girl who she eventually had, was so frightening. Because what if she came out and she looked like, you know, black, fully black? Because she mentions that sometimes, you know, it skips generation, like that lightness. It might skip many generations and everybody's light, and it gets to a child and that child is suddenly darker. And we see Gertrude is in full support of it. She has two boys, and they motion to Irene, wondering who she married and if he is like and she mentions that he's a full black man. Her children have the color, and she is very much secure with her children having the color. So in this scene, it's the secure Irene versus the two women who are insecure about their position as actual black women and who pass over, but this is like a permanent passing, and who are frightened at the concept of having children who could come out as black because it could skip the generation. It's just the way Larsen looks at the psychology of like these two women, of this, I think, two groups of women in relation to like their identity, which is one of the cause of this novel, the black identity, and the relationship of the women who can pass as white, in their relationship to their roots. That scene is already like so crazy, and you think that, oh, the revelations are like shaking you up, but then it's like Larsen just amps it up further, where Claire's husband comes back and he calls her Nick, spelled N-I-G, and Claire tells him to tell the ladies why he calls her that. And he tells her that he tells them, well, you see, it's like this: when we first married, she was as white as a lily, but I declare she's getting darker and darker. I tell her if she don't look out, she'll wake up one of these days and find she's turned into a nigger. And you clearly then see the kind of person she's married to, which just frightens Irene more, because this is the kind of white man she's with. One of the other things that we see in the novel is the fact that she has put herself in this situation, but reaching back to Irene later is because she desires to dabble. She desires to dilly-dally from here to here. She wants her foot in the privilege that her whiteness gives her, but then she wants to feel connected to her blackness, and meeting Irene was that way of maybe getting that gateway back into the community she was from, or rather a black community, and finding access to that part of herself which she expresses that she wants to keep. And it's crazy, this internal conflict we see in her, but then she ropes Irene into being like the kind of accomplice to achieving this for herself. And on the side, what I would say is kind of a subsection, a subplot is Irene and a marriage to Brian, which initially I was wondering how essential it felt like, giving us, let's say, drawn out scenes where Irene will be talking to her husband, revealing things to him about the Claire situation, or then they are just having marriage conflicts, which we see at first I just felt like, yes, maybe we could have gotten the little bit we got like in this first side, but then it goes on and we see more of like Brian at play, but then it kind of, before you get to the end, it kind of makes sense why it takes more roots. And one of what I'll say the big conversations that Larsen stirs within the novel is actually from that point of the marriage, where they're having marriage difficulties, but then we see Irene, the dutiful wife, her constant goal is trying to keep this man Brian around, because it seems that a few years ago he wanted to escape America and kind of find his footing elsewhere with his family, and it was actually kind of as a desire to escape his whole identity, because like I said, 1920s, black, dangerous, not the best time. And it's this thing that hangs over their marriage that Irene is always feels like she's always trying to curb, her husband not finally moving away with them or moving them away, and she always feels like she's trying to atone for keeping him in America and keeping their children, because it's the contrast where Irene wanted them to grow up where they are from and like amongst their community, and Brian wanted to take the children out of that life. And in one scene, we see that the children are at dinner, they are at the table eating with their father, where Irene comes in and she hears them talking about the lynchings they have been seeing on the news, lynching of black people. And it's kind of, she's shocked, she's angry at Brian because she does not want the children to encounter like those sorts of topics. But then Brian asserts that it is necessary for them to like hear of these things happening to them, that they are not so young, they are two boys, they are not young, so like very small boys anymore. And I really found that conversation very interesting, in the sense of like, should he have been telling them those at such a young age? Because you know, there's the mother, she wants to protect them, she wants them to be as safe as possible, but Brian says that she cannot keep them safe forever, or safe eventually from kind of encountering these acts of racism for themselves. And I really like that Larsen included like that little section, that little conversation in here. As we progress, Claire is integrated more and more into Irene's life, but then what we see more and more, because something that is very particular to Irene's character throughout the book is this double questioning of the self, like second guessing the self. And as we progress, she just becomes somewhat more and more of an unreliable narrator, where a lot of times before we get into like the meat of some scenes or the meat of some revelation, we get that partial disclosure that Larsen loves to do. And I like to call it withholding of the bone, where she'll just be going off in the sentence and you see that she's just like, she takes the bone away and she is holding it. Like you can probably sometimes envision what the outcome of some event is going to be, and then it's like you are not surprised, but then there was just something that I felt she did it a lot of the time. And yes, at the beginning it was feeling too much, but then at the end you just see how much sense it makes, because the novel just, in a way, I would say, goes off the rails, that by the time it gets to the end, it is so patient, so like it's not the most things happening, because like I said, long drawn out scenes, time might elapse in a long stretch, and before you know, we are back somewhere again. But then when you get to the end, you just get like, it feels like you are hit with a ton of bricks, where I feel it's the point where Larsen has used these patient tools so far into the novel, and it's where she is at the peak of her powers at the end. She just, I would say it's like she shines. She was giving a performance that was, she gives like the best part of her performance in her writing at the end, because every tool she had been saving, that she had been using and reusing throughout the novel, she uses all of them at the end, and it, I feel, makes for one of like the most interesting endings I have ever come across in a book, because it's so ambiguous. And I would not say I was shocked at the outcome of things, but it was rather how we got there, how we got to that ending. There's so much that we see Irene in a way sort of lose herself because of this woman who comes back into her life and who wants to be white but also wants to be black and wants Irene to take part in it, and she eventually ropes Irene into taking part, into like giving her a feel of both worlds. And this woman has kind of integrated herself more and more into Irene's life, so much that it starts to distort her, and we see it evident in the narration as well, where she's like questioning a lot of things. And by the end, it's glorious work. I don't know, I don't want to go too much into it because it's such a short book. I hope I did not disclose so much. I don't think I did. I think you have to read this if you have not read it, because it's really a powerful short work. I gave it all the 5 stars. I kind of like questioned it over and over with myself, but then I could not see like why not, and it just made sense with everything that Larsen did with her writing, with her storytelling, how patient it was, but how it's a lot of repeated tools, repeated devices that, yes, some with another writer they may come across as like just regurgitating the same tools and feel tiring, but at the end I just thought it made so much sense that she was doing some things over and over again, and it paid off. I think it paid off so well. I really enjoyed this. It's one of my top reads of the year so far. So I highly recommend this. If you've read this, please let me know in the comments below. You know I love the comments. I have to go now, but if you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, share, subscribe, all the good stuff, and I'll probably see you in the next one.